So this will not be a conclusion.
Reimagining punishment is the title of this encounter, this meeting. As you know, the Collège de France has for rule that French is spoken in its site, and we have one, and in my practice, there's one exception, which is this end of the year conference. And the reason why I do it is because I think it's great for those who can, of course, attend and who can understand English in that case, to have a chance to discover practices, experiences, reflections coming from different parts of the world, and of course the linguistic obstacle exists, and the only way to have this access is to use another language, and most of the time this other language is English, although it's not always the case. So we have guests and we have ideas, and I think that brings something to this, to the exchange that we can have. But of course, also in a way, by extension, it is also something that gives access to non-Francophone, non-French speakers online also. So the kind of work and reflection that we have here is most of the time in French, but and in that case inaccessible to people whose language is English and or other or do not understand French at least, and so that's a chance also for them, for us to reach out to them and for them to follow the kind of reflection that we collectively have. As you know, this event, just like the courses of the Collège de France, are on the website of the Collège de France and also on YouTube, so they are very accessible. I will very briefly make a few comments about what I've learned or what I've heard today, very briefly. And then if you have any question or comment to any of the speakers, it is still time to do that. So the first point is that we are still in a punitive moment. Despite what has been shown very effectively in the morning, with decrease in many countries, in Europe in particular, not everywhere in the world, but in Europe in particular, but also in the United States and other countries, that there's a decline. We have to remember that even with this decline, with very few exceptions, and we've been speaking about them, the level that we have of incarceration rate is much higher than it was in the 1960s or 70s. So we are still in a punitive moment, even if we have, I would say, good news about a reduction in the prison population. The second thing that we learned, and I think for many of us we knew, but it was important to have all these examples and cases showing it, is that there's no correlation between crime and punishment. There's no statistical correlation, and we can even think that there's no necessary analytical relationship between crime and punishment. We've seen empirically that Finland divided by 3 its incarceration rate and did not have more crime. We've seen that England multiplied approximately in the same proportion its prison population during that time, and the crime evolved exactly in the same way as in countries either like Finland, who were decreasing, or like other Nordic countries were on a stable, rather stable situation of their prison population. But beyond this very important empirical data, because they go against common sense, beyond that, or with that, comes a reflection on the analytical link between crime and punishment. Meaning, do we need the kind of punishment for the kind of crime? And is there a way of questioning crime, as Durkheim was saying, was doing in his division of labor in society? Third point is, we've seen that explanation for the evolution of prison population, and including the decrease, was not as obvious as we could have thought, and maybe that I could have thought. There are many factors that are at play, and not only many factors, but also factors that we may not completely understand. And they are at the very different levels of interpretation. So I think we get from the presentation we had a richer understanding of the evolution of punishment, and in particular the prison population. And there was something that I recently discovered, and we heard today, that I find quite intriguing, which is the fact that the Nordic model, of which maybe the Netherlands is getting a little closer today, is not only characterized by a low incarceration rate, that is, a low proportion of the population being in prison, but it is also characterized by a high number of entries in prison. So, and when you think of the desocialization, the destructuring, the destabilization of people, of families, of communities, due to going to prison, even if it's for 1 month or 2 months, this is something that needs probably a reflection. It's not just a question of the length that people spend in prison, which is, of course, especially when we think of the case of the United States, we're hearing this morning, this afternoon, 50 years in prison. But it is also the mere fact of getting into a prison, which I think we have to be thinking about. The fourth point is the question of visibility or visibilization. So most of our conversation, and that was true of part of my lectures as well, have been on prison, and prison related to criminal activity, which is what you expect, of course, of prison, but has not always been the case. There are many other reasons for people to be in prison, potentially, which are not necessarily criminal. But we've been focusing on that with good reasons. But we've heard also that we should not forget that some populations are confined in places that are not called prison anymore, but are still places of incarceration. And I'm talking in particular, and we heard that several times, of migrants, undocumented migrants. And even when we say undocumented migrants, we have to remember that many of these undocumented migrants are unlawfully incarcerated or confined in detention center. Unlawfully because they are asylum seekers or because they have children who are French, in our case here, and in fact, 90%, between 80 and 90% of them will be released by judges. So they had no reason in the first place to get into this. So this is something important to have in mind, because part of the prison population is visible and another part of incarcerated is invisible. And I would even add, and I mentioned it in one of my recent lectures, that we have to think of punishment also beyond the person who is punished in terms of vicarious punishment. That is the punishment of the partner, of the children, of the family, of the community, and we had examples today of that too. And this is extremely important. When a judge sentences someone to prison, he or she sentences a whole family and sometimes a whole community to punishment. The fifth point is the question of course, distribution and inequality, and we've heard examples and data both this morning and this afternoon. And the question, the initial question is, who gets punished? And of course, to understand, to answer that question, you have to ask yourself, what gets punished? Because there's some, the reason why some are more punished than others and some are spared more than others is because of the kind of crime that are recognized and therefore punishment that are given. So who gets punished means what gets punished. But what gets punished implies who is considered punishable. And the question of punishability, which is an awful word, I agree, is extremely important, because the choices that society makes about who has to be punished for what is strictly related with the social, racial, gender position of this population. So the question here is the question, and we heard that this afternoon, of the reproduction of inequality, the way punishment is a crucial element in the reproduction of inequality. And the sixth and final point is what we ended with, sparking imagination, and I hope that the analysis of this morning on politics and trends in Europe, with all the complexity and refinement that we heard, give us a sense of possibilities, but also this afternoon the inspiring examples from history, from ethnography, and from community studies. And the range of interesting cases we heard about go from local initiative of collective resistance to a broader reflection on the project of prison abolition. And since we're at the Collège de France, I will leave you with a reflection that is quite well known by Claude Lévi-Strauss, who was didn't have the reputation of a very progressive man, but was had some brilliant intuition, and he has in Triste Tropique, which is translated, as you know, in English as Triste Tropique, this quote: "To an observer belonging to a different society, certain practices of ours would appear to be similar in nature to anthropophagy, which we deem so alien to our notion of civilization. I'm thinking of our customs regarding justice and prison." So this is what he writes in Triste Tropique, and he adds, "If such an observer were to consider the solution consisting in dealing with dangerous individuals by expelling them out of the social body and keeping them temporarily or definitively isolated from the rest of humanity in establishments especially intended for this purpose, most of those we call primitive would regard such a custom with profound horror, marking us in their eyes with the same barbarity which we are tempted to impute to them." And he was taking the example of the Plains Indians, noting that, quote, "It would never have occurred to them that the punishment of the culprit could have implied the rupture of social ties. On the contrary, the settlement of the case involved a reciprocal system of debt and gifts until obtaining the progressive correction of the disorder." This text, as you know, was published in 1955 at a time when the French prison population was at its lowest. And we can certainly try to imagine what would be Lévi-Strauss's critique of the inhumanness of our justice system, might have, what it would have been, and how much more severe if he had been writing today, 7 decades later almost, when the number of inmates has more than tripled in France and been multiplied by 7, as we heard, in the United States. Thank you very much.